What's up, gentlemen?
Hey man, how you doing, Matt?
Oh man, I'm doing good.
Good evening.
Mr. Simeon, how are you, sir?
I'm really good. It's the end of my day,
Oh yeah, same here.
so I will be less than 100%. I still haven't been able to hack being totally alive.
Yeah,
But
That's okay. I'm already into some rum, so
yeah, yeah. So that's really why Tom and I wanted to schedule these at 8:30 at night, because neither one of us are operating at 100% by that time, and I feel like this is when it's the most fun. You know, like, so Simeon, man, I want to waste none of our time, so I'm just gonna like jump right into this, because thank you for so much for dropping by on this. So for everyone's knowledge, Simeon and I know each other through an incredibly awesome group in New York called Wall Street Deadhead. It's a really, really obscure and yet most awesome kept secret in all of Manhattan, I think. It is filled with awesome people. Simeon is in there. Somehow they let me in. I'm not quite sure how, but like, and he's just a cool guy, and I love everyone in that group. And so basically, I'm so psyched to spend some time with you. Thanks for coming on.
my pleasure. Yeah, that group is, I read about it before I even moved to New York. I've been here about almost 6 years, but it was like, I think about a decade ago, it was like in Rolling Stone, and it was just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool.
I mean, what?
Yeah.
I got to move to New York. That was not the real, well, let me just say it was the real reason I moved here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I moved here, and it took like a year or two, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a part of the group. And I'm like, great. I signed up, and I'll get my t-shirt and look at the membership directory, and then COVID hit.
Yeah. Oh, Hey, you see what I got hanging in the background? Speaking of which, this is a Rayo Negro original right there, hanging out there. He put that up for Here the Tiger, Jerry's birthday, and I got the first one. I ordered it literally the minute he announced it, and it's literally one of 85 or something. It's great.
Wow.
I love it.
Beautiful.
Tony's amazing. He sent me like the wrapper it comes in is another painting with a marker that he does like another cool thing on. It's like it's like gift after gift after gift. It's amazing.
On art.
Yeah, it's awesome. So let me set a stage real quick, and I just really want to kind of dive in here. So Tom and I like know each other through a different group that we're in, also equally awesome, called Shift. It's no longer in existence, but Tom and I had these really long, we'd go on these day-long retreats, right? And Tom and I would be like at lunch and every break and every time just talking about the most random fucking health stuff.
I think we also showed up at almost the same time.
Yeah,
too.
right.
I think that was easy. We're like, we don't know anybody here. I'll talk to you.
Yeah. And so after like a year of that, people are like, you guys should consider putting a show together, because like we would rally like a dozen people into these conversations. This is not like, these were like not just Tom and I like smoking a hookah in the corner. Like, no, this was like a real thing. And all of our friends were into the same stuff, right? So that's why it was so easy to engage people, because we were all like super curious. And we've got a really cool, unique inner circle of friends who have done some really awesome, groundbreaking stuff in the health and wellness field. So we're super passionate about it. But one thing that keeps coming up like crazy is psychedelics, as you might understand.
As it is everywhere
yeah,
now.
Right. It's like the AI before AI was a thing and took all over the news cycle. Right now everything's AI, which, funny enough, this show ends up becoming about psychedelics and AI in every single episode.
We need to have a buzzer. We should both get a buzzer, right? And the second somebody says AI or psychedelics, that buzzer gets pressed.
Yeah. It's funny. And so, I think because of our personalities and our just passion for the research component of this, we've both personally gone pretty far down the rabbit hole with respect to, what are the therapies about? I met the guys at a Shift event, actually, the guy, Matthew and his partner that run the Hopkins lab here in Baltimore. I can't remember. Yeah. Talked to those guys.
Pissed I missed that one.
Oh man, such cool guys. And like,
so pissed.
And I mean, Tom and I have both applied to be study applicants for the Hopkins test. Like, we are just like, we're just really into it. And so when I found out you were into this stuff, and then found out to what level you were into it, I was, obviously immediately smitten, because I'm like, oh my God, this is like totally like right up my alley. And you and I have been talking about this for a while now, a couple of years at least. Like, and when I heard you give that little talk at Wall Street, I said, we really got to reignite this conversation, because like, just even since I've known you, the delta between where you started and where you're at now is like, I mean, that's come a long way in like 2 years. And Tom doesn't know any of this, by the way. So like, I'm so excited right now.
I literally
like,
Googled JLS about 10 minutes before we got on, and I go, I only know a handful of these.
Yeah. But he does use the Trip app, so we do want to talk about that.
The Trip app is absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So Simeon, just lay it on us, man. Like, walk us into this. You know, I know you got an interesting genesis on how you got involved in this, and yeah, let's just take it from there.
The origin story.
Yeah, no, there's a very simple origin story. It's not dissimilar from a lot of origin stories. I was a precocious teenager. And, you know, you're a teen, so you want to experiment with consciousness and get into anything you can. And one of those things that I was really curious about were mystical states and drugs and plant medicines and everything under the sun. And, you know, just stumbled upon some literature and some molecules pretty early. And, you know, as a younger teenager, I met, you know, a couple of the giants in the space who wrote varieties of psychedelic experience, Robert Masters and Gene Houston, who were, you know, quite pivotal in so many of the clinical trials that occurred, you know, before I was born, before Nixon and the Controlled Substances Act, and everybody said, you know, you can't do this anymore for research or recreational. And they had developed a pretty advanced protocol, and we're working, you know, directly with LSD and sourcing directly from the source. And, you know, just to start there was just phenomenal, and a really rigorous academic, you know, protocol. What's the psychology? What's happening to the brain? And that's not to dismiss all the fun. Like my first, and still one of my favorite protocols, is a bit tongue-in-cheek, but the jam band, like, you know, I started going to Dead shows, of course, and everything else that followed, and experimenting. But no, it started, you know, 30 odd years ago, and wasn't sure where the road would take me, but I knew I'd always be close to these, you know, these compounds, these molecules. So since then, I've been able to explore and participate in every aspect, from the underground to the research to the philanthropy. And I've always liked business and entrepreneurship. So we, and myself and, you know, some of my partners and advisors started to see, you know, some signals about 4.5 years ago. And we were already investing, and, you know, I've had, you know, a couple of, you know, successful exits and got about 12 really successful failures. So totally knew the entrepreneurial journey. So we kind of knew this was going to be a space. A lot of us were pretty adept in wherever it was at that time, and started putting some money to work. So we were pretty early, and I mean, technically one of the first to host Investor Psychedelic Summit. And there were just enough signals from being in the space that, you know, we said, hey, this is going to be a value investment, and, you know, it's going to be, you know, 10 years, but we're going to make some money. And then, of course, things happened a little faster. So we've already had markets up and markets down. Now they're on the upswing, with really great deal flow. Yeah. So to answer the question again, the origin story was not dissimilar from a lot. It started early. I had a profound experience, and then another profound experience. And then it just became, let's just make life a profound experience. And where can I be close to these molecules? And that was the origin story. And now I'm on a podcast with you guys 32 years.
Yeah. So
the highlight of your career.
Obviously the highlight of your career. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My academia and travel. Yes.
So let me ask a couple things jump out. And we covered a little ground there, so I'll just kind of pull a few things out of the air here real quick. But like, yours is an interesting story. I agree with one thing. It's not that dissimilar. It's almost like everybody in this space who's got any kind of consciousness about the subject matter generally has some event or shaping in their past that kind of got them open to the idea, receptive to its benefits. And really, funny enough, I've never met a psychedelic enthusiast who wasn't hyper pragmatic about the psychedelic experience, right? Like it's very well analyzed in my experience. It's very well understood, and it's understood because people have a superhuman need to clarify every bit of it, because in so many ways it's completely untethering, because you don't have a vocabulary to describe this sort of thing prior to doing it. And I'm sorry if this sounds a little waxing poetic, but it's very much, that's how I feel as somebody who has had that exact same experience. And that's kind of where my passion comes from for this. But
I think Matt, it is the complete opposite of what the trope of a psychedelic user is, which is somebody that just wants to go out and get messed up for the sake of getting messed up, right?
Well, to Simeon's point about the Dead shows, right? Like, I mean,
have fun with it, but whoa, this is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you have that tired cliche about like bad acid coming back to haunt somebody like 30 years later? I'm like, come on, you've obviously.
I mean, even Wayne's World did a play on that. Like, don't eat the red rope licorice. Yeah. I remember that vividly, and I was like, that's the dumbest reference, but it's hysterical.
Yeah, it's hilarious. but Simeon, the one thing that's interesting is you kind of, it almost sounds like you came at it from like a hyper pragmatic standpoint. Like you were like very analytical about what was going on and had like a fairly cogent idea of how to address that.
Yeah. There that was the genesis, it just, for whatever reason. I mean, I still had fun. And I think, now that this space is like so out of the closet and is lifting, there's definitely a level of like heavy seriousness to it sometimes, or I was like, okay, I get it. We're dealing with intractable diseases. We're dealing with, everything from neurological disorders to the deepest, darkest depression, to schizophrenia, to bipolar, to just the human condition, the general anxiety disorder. I mean, every human has that.
Sure.
Well, there's that promise in it. And, the world we've created requires, academics and data and science and insurance companies and contracts. So that's the majority of my time. And it feels like it's the majority of the space, but there's nobody in this space who's actually imbibed in the molecules, who doesn't fully appreciate, wait, this is fun. And it's not that complicated. And it's not about necessarily, I mean, sometimes an experience is simple. Wow, I just saw a minor shift, and I'm able to appreciate, just the wind in my hair or taking a walk. I mean, sometimes it's so simple, but you see that a lot. And that's true of any industry where it becomes really serious, and where this started, where it has to be the research. And I wish people had more fun about it. There was a really cool convening with a bunch of dignitaries and serious people, and out west a few weeks ago, and I didn't know everybody, but like at the end they're like, oh, I get it, JLS Fund, you put the fun in fund. And I'm like, I might use that. Now maybe it's first time, but it's not either or, it's both. And I started academically, but then had fun. And then there's, all the mystical cultures, like, to live in the Amazon, to live in West Africa, to live with forest cultures where, a great bulk of even the new compound entities, the new drugs, which will be inspired by psychedelics, will be highly informed by the protocols, which, to spend a week in a pygmy rainforest dancing the entire time while eating iboga is, incredibly profound, but it was a lot of fun. You're in an altered state, you're singing, you're dancing, you're expressing, everything around you is beautiful, the food, the weather, the smells. So started academically, but realized, that's just one path. And in the spirit of this whole space and where it's going and where it's been and where it's at, you're definitely seeing, an aspect of, how we met, Wall Street Deadhead. I would be surprised if there was anybody in that group who, probably didn't have a chemical of some kind, even if it was a beer.
Right. Yeah.
But legal cannabis, or right? It's a thing.
Yeah, and I came at it like almost the polar opposite, if I could figure that, if that was an actual point, because I came into it from a recreational curiosity that immediately turned to near rage that I wasn't told about this earlier, and that it was like highly off limits. And I'm like, how on God's green earth could I have been so completely misled about a compound? Like literally, like I'm talking like moments into the first realization of that something new was happening in my body. Literally moments after that, I've been hooked ever since, because it's like one of those things where you're like, this is such a better situation going on from head to toe than was going on a minute ago. And, I've been very vocal on this show and to all my friends. I love microdosing, is like revolutionized my life. Like I absolutely cannot say enough good about it. So and yes, there's aspects of me that are that typical deadhead, deadhead, Wook running around, dropping acid into his eyes and being stupid. But most of, 99, the other 99% of me is just like super appreciative that these compounds exist and can't wait for fucking the world to just catch up.
See, and you guys are going to hate me with this, because I was all like, Nancy Reagan said no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, when I finally dipped a toe, I was like, oh shit, my whole life was a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. And Simeon, you look at those guys coming out of Hopkins and stuff, man, those people, a lot of them were not into this. Like they were not your prototypical, psychedelic person. They were people that were sick with something that was really, really wrong, and to see how fast that turns around. And I'd love your logo sheet, by the way, on JLS is crazy long. So what, of those companies in your group that are focused on, really pushing the health part of this forward, how many of them would you say would fall into that category? Or is that just the theme now? You just,
are you asking for investing tips?
Yeah, no.
It's not invested, but
yes,
all of them, obviously. You can't have, a grand slam or home run, all of them. So some will do better than others, but, myself and, a lot of my partners, we like early stage. So sometimes you just don't know. And,
sure.
With that risk, we've invested, my favorite is sometimes meeting somebody or I've known them a long time, might go back decades, right? And it's like, oh, wow, so great you called me. What are you working on? And then before the call is even over, if I have their bank information or PayPal, I'll be like, did you just send me money? I'm like, yeah, now we have enough for you to hire an attorney and send me proper contracts and let's start raising. We'll help you. We'll socialize it. There's something here. So we like to get in as early as possible because of exactly that,
Sure.
That, yeah.
So what kind of companies are you into? Talk to us about a couple of the, maybe not your favorite. I know you can't name favorites as the father, you can't, you gotta love all your children.
Good. My parents, told me I would.
Yeah.
But yes, we kind of invest in 3 different areas.
Okay.
All fall under the umbrella of, optimizing, curing sickness or optimizing well-being, anything in that polarity, if you will. So drug discovery and development, which from a risk-reward perspective is probably the biggest, right? Especially where we invest, right, at really low valuations, where usually the timeline to exit is really long. Developing a new drug takes a long time, from preclinical to FDA, even if it's not FDA in jurisdictions where we can, it's just more lengthy. Then there's tech stuff, right? And that could be everything from wearables to VR devices that, touch upon mental health and or help in the preparation or post the trip integration. And I'd say there's one other bucket, just because we're all passionate about education. And, I myself had an ed tech background. some of the platforms that are training the next, 100,000 psychedelic psychotherapists, where, a lot of the molecules that will come to market as, approved, quote unquote, pharmaceuticals will be unique in the sense that they will require some level of therapy, some a lot, some a little. And it's not easy necessarily to guide people, and there's decades if not centuries of, whether you look at how indigenous people use medicines to help cure and alleviate, or just modern psychology and psychiatry. So that's going to be a part of this space for sure, but
that's a huge debate right there.
And areas we don't necessarily, but myself and partners, and if it's really good or we really like it, we might set up a special purpose vehicle outside of the fund. But generally don't do real estate, clinics, retreats. Have been a part of a lot of them. I've invested in them, but from the fund, it was a very concerted thesis of those three buckets specifically, which are big parts of the growing ecosystem. Of course, I can't, not say, and I know the buzzer about AI, but of course.
Yeah.
So much AI stuff we're looking at. And there's this last few months, a lot of non-invasive neuromodulation, as well as invasive neuromodulation. There's a whole arc of, if you just look at mental health and technology, I might be exaggerating for effect, but in a decade, might it just be a good algo and a brain chip, and we won't have the need for medicines because we've gotten so good at the tech and the science of the brain, emotions, humanity, which, is also a bit big brothery, right? And might create a whole other slew of mental health disorders. In fact, I said a few years ago, and I know it was a Rick quote, I don't know if it was a panel, I can't remember it exactly, but it was something to the effect of Rick Doblin, who founded MAPS, which is, furthest, an FDA phase 3 with eminent approval on MDMA for a post-traumatic stress disorder, or ecstasy for PTSD, has a very dense and heavy component of their medicine. MDMA has been around, right? So we know how it works. It's like, hey, we need a lot of therapy with this for this indication, PTSD, which makes a ton of sense, right? Sure. Vet or someone who is abused, or however you can generate post-traumatic stress. And somebody asked them about AI. This is several years ago, AI chatbots, or will the therapist be AI? And he's like, yes, and I predict we'll need even more humans to do therapy from the stress of AI messing it all up. So that component is going to be with us for quite a long while on the therapeutic side. But I'm contradicting myself already by saying tech's moving so fast. So that's definitely an area we're looking at and see a lot of stuff. Whether it's top secret, military, where a lot of stuff comes out of either military or, porn. I think those are the two great.
Yeah, I'll do it. That's a recurring thing on this show too. Yeah. We say we wouldn't even have a podcast right now if it wasn't.
You literally hit our last 15 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
MDMA was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. You're so 3 weeks ago. But you know what, Simeon, what you say right there though is not a lot of people who outside of this sphere know the integration part of this. And I think that, when people put when they define medicine not only as a chemical constituent, but also a therapeutic constituent, and define that as the medicine, that feels more in line with a real productive psychedelic experience rather than just a rave in the desert, right? Those are very different experiences with different outcomes, and so if I'm taking it for a PTSD, well, God damn it, we better have the therapy part, because why the fuck are we doing this if not, right? That's
That's a very, I happen to agree with that argument for PTSD, where you have that experience, you're able to relive it, you're able to reassociate it, you have that catharsis. I think that's true with anything that's trauma-based. You might get some pushback around things like Parkinson's. hey man, that might not be rooted in trauma. You might not need something like therapy. It's just correct these, neural pathways, reset dopamine receptors, whatever the is that, we're heavily looking at. So there's two different camps on when therapy is needed. And then, of course, the bigger trend, and some of our portfolio companies certainly have a lot of these candidates, candidate being a drug that's not yet approved, but hey, it's good enough. Hey, this might.
They got some good data. Yeah.
Let's test with animals and go into human trials, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a very large trend, which is certainly influenced by, our society today and how healthcare works, that a trip is a side effect. Let's take that out entirely. So let's look at LSD without the trip. Let's look at psilocybin without the trip. Let's look at ibogaine without the trip. And a lot of these, drug development companies, if not most, if they're not thinking about it, if they're not doing it, they're thinking about it. And there's a part of me that's like, but then there's another part. I get it. Like if I can just take a pill and it goes away, right? In the traditional way, where all of a sudden I'm, finished my bottle and whatever that thing was is gone. The jury's out on that, and I don't know if we're ever.
I don't know, man. I'm team. Hey, consciousness is a little too complicated for human thought.
Yeah, yeah.
I love this, but just you can't dismiss that trend, which really started about. I mean, it started before money came into the space, but it was really
certainly isn't hurt by money entering the space.
Yeah. I also feel like this, removal of symptom thing is fundamentally wrong in medicine. Yes, you want people to feel better,
right.
But look, I'm an acupuncturist. We're going for root cause.
Yeah.
It's how can we turn it back? How can we go back to the beginning and fix that, right? And I almost feel like, with psychedelics, it puts you in that primordial state, if you will.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning when it was all soup,
right,
and get into it.
Right. Yeah, that happens both psychologically, and it depends on the compound and the protocol, but it happens not only psychologically, but there's a bunch of great research and a bunch of trials and a bunch of money coming into it based on not just the psychology, but now we have technology where we can scan somebody's brain and go like, holy, are you kidding me? The brain is younger? How did that happen? Or, those receptors are now lighting up, which never lit up before. So we're getting very good at the tech side of proving a lot of this out. And yeah, it's really, if the metaphor is, I'll go with a dead metaphor or a marathon. I'm going to go with a marathon metaphor. I don't know. If you're running a marathon, although it's been around like on the quote unquote industry, the space has been here since the beginning of humanity or fungal species or, our evolution into, post, simians. Which is another spelling, but it's moving incredibly fast right now, but it's also like it's not even the first mile of the marathon.
No, we're definitely at the very beginning for sure.
You're sitting on the couch, I don't know, a spouse or a friend says, hey, like, stop eating the jumbo bag of Doritos. Let's go to the gym. And you don't even started training. I mean, it's just so early in how it's going to play out. And it's not just what we're talking about. So much of it and so much of our time is spent around policy and law.
I was going to actually get to that in a minute. Actually, let's put a pin in that real quick. I do want to talk one thing before we get too far away from it. But like when you get into the wearable stuff, obviously this starts to dance in our ballpark over here with Tom and I, because we're not on the academic forefront of this, but we are on the fringe of the gadgets that sort of measure it or try to make it better.
We're out there looking.
Yeah. We're actively in that space, obviously. And, it's cool. Like Tom went through your logo sheet earlier today and saw Trip, and he's like, oh, I love that app. Like, so.
But you even mentioned like technology for like, look, I've got a vagal nerve stimulator right here.
Which one is,
this is the, what do they call this one? This is Sensate.
oh yeah.
Pulsetto, Sensate, and then there's another one that is like the top 3 popularity.
I've been playing with Pulsetto this week. Definitely played with that.
Yeah.
It's all getting better.
Yeah. Like, so you said you were measuring stuff. Like, can you do that at home? Like, how far off are we be able to measure those things on our own? Because like, I'll tell you what, measuring my brain to tell me like what new sensors are lighting up, that shit sounds exciting.
Yeah. It's moving so fast. I mean, if you look at the cost of anything, just this computer and the technology we're talking through, this was a bazillion dollars, and we'd take the size of Manhattan to process this. They get it for like $100. So all that stuff is happening at such a fast pace. Not just the sensors and the non-invasive stuff that picks up all the biometrics and HRV and heart rate and all these other indicators, right? But the blood and the gut biome, and it's all moving so fast. I think the bigger question with all of that is, and again, this is a big a big thing I think people don't always see is, great, we're going to have all this health, but what society are we creating?
Yeah.
There'll be no end of even if we cure depression, okay, something else will happen, and it'll be PTSD from, inebriated, detached consciousness that was split from an AI on Mars drilling an. I mean, that's the human condition to some extent.
Sure, yeah. We're like geared to have some kind of PTSD, like whatever it is at that particular time, but like seems to be.
Life will never be as easy as we need it to be.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump into let's take the pin out, because I was going to go into that. I know you'd been there. I'd love to hear about like some of the policy stuff. I mean, you've spoken to some pretty important people in pretty important places about this topic. So walk us through that.
Well, I mean, I'm talking to Matt and Tom.
I mean, aside from the obvious apex of that triangle.
I mean, yes, this is the pinnacle of your career.
Yeah, I didn't know that. 100%.
Ministers, and the industry.
Yeah.
Literally hundreds of listeners.
Yeah,
quality, not quantity. That being, the policy side of it is so critical. If you're raising money or you're innovating on something and the laws find no possible way to allow you to succeed, you need to see that. And I think there's also not an ethical or moral part of it all, but last week I had the really profound. I spent a day at Angola.
Yeah.
Which is
what are you doing there?
Security prison, all the non-violent offenders, and got to spend time with a couple dozen death row inmates and guys who are in life sentences for, a third offense because they had a joint in a state where, it might be legal now, but, it wasn't when they did it. So, because we're talking about psychedelics and, effectively drug policy is a huge part of all this. And if you're not looking at drug policy, not just how laws are created, but where they're rooted, how systemic they can be, and how hard and or easy they are to change. Again, like just going back to that first investor summit, we hosted the founder who got the first psychedelic company to NASDAQ and the founder of Decriminalized Nature. So two very opposing things. One's like, it's got to be FDA and backed by insurance, and this is the only way we'll mainstream it, which I don't disagree. Like the system we have now, if that's the system that's approved, the access is just that much greater because that's what we're conditioned to. We're conditioned going to a doctor and getting insurance, at least in the US, right? But then on the polar side, it was this grow, gather, gift. Why can't we create community to support each other in cultivating our own mushrooms or peyote or whatever the substance is, and it not be decriminalized? And what was really great about that day was it wasn't one or the other. It was, these are both going to happen, and it's going to be a dance. Some people think this is in the lead, and some people think this is in the lead, where we have, cannabis is a different animal, but it's a great analog to, wait, I can get weed like,
I was just about to ask you that. Is that the gateway for legislative changes?
It is and it isn't. It is in that you'll see if there's legislative change at the state level, they borrow from cannabis because it was already there. Oregon, Colorado kind of being in the forefront with psilocybin-assisted therapy right now. But when you study those systems, when you help draft policy, when you look at how companies are rolling it out, they've definitely borrowed. And some of the cannabis borrowed from other regulated markets, and those
and there's nothing wrong with that. And Maryland basically took everybody's playbook and said for cannabis, they're like, I think they just took like the top 2 in every state, and they're like, this is ours, because it's like really, I think I've known a lot of places with like people talking to people at the regulatory level on cannabis in a lot of states, and those kind of were messy trajectories in a lot of those cases, right? They weren't like a smooth ride. Maryland kind of just opened for business and was, it had some growing pains. Sure, everybody does, but it wasn't like the stories I had seen in other states. And I think that's simple. And Maryland was just like, well, I'm not going to reinvent this wheel. Why the hell should I? Like, I'm just getting, this worked. It was great. Let's do it. And I'm sure people will.
I do think the rec requirements are a little goofy.
Oh, they are all, the whole thing is goofy. But like, if I was a psilocybin guy and I was trying to get that on, I think it is a pretty good blueprint to follow that if cannabis broke all those eggs, right?
Well, and it's laughable because Amanita's not,
which I just
regulated.
think is fucking crazy.
Like, and I'm like, that's the scary one to me.
Yeah.
That's
the dark Slavic shaman,
Yeah, I know. That's the sampler shroom, the Amanita muscaria. And again, it's arguably one of the strongest legal psychedelics, but there's a lot of legal psychedelics. Kana is amazing. That's like an ethical MDMA. There's a lot. And there's because we get to spend time with chemists and, invest in drug discovery and development. We see hundreds of new molecules. I am able to, to some extent go, well, show me the animal data. Has this ever been tested in a human? But there's so many new ones.
Sure.
I'm having a party this weekend.
Yeah, I'm having a party. Yeah. We will be up to 2. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. We have, Tom and I have a friend who was tracking the number of psychedelics he took, and it was in like 50 or something. Right. And he said, and at least 10 of those are only authorized for experimental purposes. And I was like, so, okay.
Any jungle or forest, and the amount of natural, so many of them. Yes, a lot can be created in the lab. A lot can be synthesized, but it's rare, or at least in comparison. There's just so many natural drugs out there. And the time I spend in the 2 largest rainforests and just in a little village, and I'm like, oh, what do you use that for? And I go, really? It's a non-addictive opioid, and it's nowhere on clinicaltrials.gov and nowhere in like some pharma vault. So, and
you're not talking about kratom there, or kratom, or however you pronounce that one?
Kratom is, definitely a big one, and it grows, indigenous, Indonesian, that part of Asia, but, parts of equatorial Africa, and it's used for a lot of different things. I'm talking about things you've never heard of, because like, who's going 200 miles into a pygmy rainforest and hanging out for a week with no running water, electricity, and a phone, and then just noticing someone who, sprained their ankle, or a female having cramps from a menstrual cycle, and then picking a seed, a little fruit from this tree, and go, why are you chewing on this bitter thing? And they're like, well, it makes the pain go away. I go, what do you mean it makes the pain go away? What do you feel like? Well, the pain goes away. And I'm like, well, can I try much? They're like, you can, but you're not going to feel anything. I'm like, wait, so you have something that makes the pain go away, but you don't feel anything unless you are in pain. And I go, this is a non-addictive opioid. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know,
Simeon,
And doesn't that just like
ask you
piss you off?
something?
You're like, why can't that be? Yeah, go.
I'm almost worried that those kind of compounds,
Yeah.
when they get, let's say, to the West,
Yeah.
or when they get to a quote unquote, and this is a very colonizer term here, a civilized society, that it will become either over harvested, depleted. It's another reason to invade a country. All of these very negative things. And I know this is a big question, but like, how do you combat that? How do you protect that, but at the same time share a valuable compound with the world? And I mean, that's a giant question.
It's challenging. I mean, we do it in novel ways. Like we kind of believe that plants are kind of important right now.
Yeah.
And for a while, I mean, they have a pretty big function.
Yeah.
And then when you find a plant that could become extinct from overcultivation, overharvesting, a whole mess of synonyms to that. What's a novel way to protect that and ensure they're growing? So then you get into regenerative agriculture. There's a trend right now, and it's a good one around climate change, right? And carbon sequestration. So we're evolving some innovation that will protect plants and certain psychedelic plants in the second largest rainforest, but not for that reason. It's for the reason of carbon sequestration and selling carbon credits and making it, a non-pillageable, non-harvestable, or in a bad way area. So there's ways to do it. And the innovation, I think, and this is something I struggle with a lot. It's like you can't displace the money equation. You can't displace. Here we go, Tom. I'm gonna sound colonial, right?
Yeah, wait.
I'm sorry, I threw out a term and now I sound all woke.
Yeah.
Join them and change it from the inside. So there's a little of that. And that's no way to discount activism, because movements have shifted a ton of things, but it could be a little of both. So that's how we're kind of approaching, whether it's reciprocity, whether it's making, hey, this could be so valuable and it could absolutely be ruined. Well, wait, how do we protect this? But always finding, not the angle, but a path where it's the right thing to do, and those who would profit from it are profiting from it still, but in a different way without destroying that ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing I like about where we're at in history, and this might be a little rosy glassed, naivete perhaps, but I think we are at a better place than we've ever been, in the sense that we've got guys in our age band that remember the Atari 2600 and how fun life was then, and now are kind of went through a period where you're like, now the world is kind of turning into not an amazing spot. And now we've got sort of like the influence and financial resources and education and life experience to say, you know what, kind of from here forward, we kind of want to do a new thing. And then the people before us or younger than us are at a spot where they're like, dude, no, you guys are like blind. This world fucking sucks ass, and we need it to fucking change. And some of that we could make fun of them for and blah, blah, blah. But the point is there's a lot more people motivated to make shit right now than there ever has been in the past. And we're sort of in this weird fucking twilight between 70-year-old presidents and fucking somebody who,
dude, they're in their 80s.
Yeah, well,
let's be honest.
But like, I just saw that cover that did you see that company that launched to some to a little bit of negative fanfare? I want to say it was off the coast of Japan, but they turned carbon dioxide into essentially seashells. So they suck it out of the air, they turn it into like what is essentially a seashell, and they drop it to the bottom of the ocean. And
nice.
Like a lot of people right now are up in arms about this, because I forget, I don't know if one of you remembers the term, but it's where they like influence the atmosphere to create a different weather effect. Like they use it by molecular atomized salt is one way, and this way, I don't know what the mechanism of action was, but this way takes the CO2 out of the air,
What do they call that? Cloud seeding,
something like that. Yeah. And so I guess where I was going with this is we've got all these fucking weird technologies out there, like, and got a wearable thing that'll scan my head for this, and Tom's little vagal thing over here, I'll do that. And, and you've got people like your company, Simeon, and this is one of the things I love about it, is that you guys get an opportunity to look at a lot of different technologies across a really wide playing field. And I've said that term here about other things I like a lot, because I think the very horizontal thinkers are going to come out of the next decade really well with some really good changes, because they can pluck things out from a wide trajectory and say, you know what, these 8 things, when I put them together, are going to be fucking awesome. Yeah. And I'm going to take this from this and this from that. And we got information like that. And then, buzzer time, AI comes even in the mix, and it makes it even faster. You know what I mean? Like, we're just at a time where we're either on the way to the end or the beginning, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
There's not a single day where it's like, is this really good or is this really bad? And like, it could, like, we're really at a precipice. And I don't know, in my past life or my next one, or, 100 years ago or 100 years from now, I mean, everybody says we're living in an interesting time, right? But I don't know, this one
feels a little different. I'm sure they all said that, but it's a little hard to think about it, because it's so profound now. So, like, where do you go from here, man? Like, you guys are, you're crushing it with your portfolio companies you're building. What are you in your second one right now, or third? I can't remember.
We recently launched Fund 2.
Fund 2, okay.
Capital and all the, logos you had mentioned early, or a bulk of them. There's not a lot of complexity. It's, Fund 2 and what is Fund 3, and beginning to think about what's a few years from now, and that thesis to magnetize those right companies. And so there's that. And then, again, the group of partners and advisors all have personal ambitions and play in so many parts of this ecosystem that, we'll see, what JLS is like, 5 or 10 years from now, but at least for the foreseeable future, having done a bunch of deals early on, and then our first fund, and now, great momentum on, Fund 2, and already beginning to discuss what Fund 3 is, and horizons, and should we shift the thesis a little based on either intuition or the same signals we saw. Sure. 4.5.
Is there a is there like a philosophical difference between 1 or 2 in terms of the portfolio companies?
Definitely a different concentration. Like 4 years ago, we wouldn't necessarily be looking at non-invasive. We wouldn't look at a Pulsetto or a Trip 4 years ago. It just wasn't there, So what's that? That's not there today. That'll be there in 4 years ago. So that's what we start to look
I see.
at. So
that's what you start.
The kind of convergence of it all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so do you see that convergence widening the field significantly, or do you see it kind of like we're just on a trajectory right now, we're going to kind of stay even keel and just keep steady building? Or do you think we're like ready to pop?
Can I say both?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
that's fair. I just
both paths. I mean, depending on where you look at it, I could see things popping, i.e. where everything we've invested in and continue to diligence on drug discovery and development feels like it's right on the edge of popping. But then you look at the more esoteric stuff that is a little more complicated, and that's going to take a little longer. But the second it comes, it's going to supersede and go so much further, leapfrog over everything else. So,
and that's the sort of the mental health and the sort of more touchy feely stuff that we talk about in this. Is that
you're like right now? I mean, how comfortable would you be with drilling a hole in your skull and putting a chip in there? That
I have the book.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
maybe not the chip, but the hole.
So Simeon, Tom and I did a whole episode on that show Upload, where that and so like that brings that is a compelling story to me, because it it sort of feels like there's a couple things that feel inevitable to me, right? Like like things that seem so obvious that they're sort of don't feel like conversation points. They feel like more like historical reference, even though they haven't happened yet. One of them, psychedelics are going to literally change shit forever, right? Like I feel like that's not a question mark. And when I talk about it, especially obviously, Simeon, obviously with you and Tom, but like, even when I talk to like my parents, you know, like people who have had zero education, zero knowledge, zero experience, still leave the conversation going, man, if even 10% of that's true, like that's fucking nuts. Like we're about to go crazy. Right. And then people like you, Simeon and Tom, like when I have conversations, it's so like, oh, well, what's on the horizon? And it's always something exciting. It's never a day where it's not exciting. So like, I feel like it's inevitable to the point of like, I just don't know how we got there, but I know we're already there, right? Like it's, you know, and uploading your consciousness. Like those are like kind of the two things that I'm like, well, like,
but you know, that's the crazy thing. It's like when we watch it, I'm almost feeling like I'm just watching a future sitcom.
Yeah, right.
Like it's Friends 2050.
But here, Simeon, you want to yeah. You know, I had a crazy thought the other day, and Tom, I didn't even talk to you about this, but I wrote it down for for one of the projects I'm working on. But the reason I think it's inevitable that we upload because the tech is moving so fast that it seems illogical that we wouldn't, right? Like even if it's not like a permanent thing, it take a vacation in cyberspace, like you can do all kinds of stuff that you couldn't do, right? And then you could just assimilate that memory, right? Like so, it's like you did it, even though you didn't do it.
There was a show on that too, taking vacations.
But here's where I'm going with this, right? Like psychedelics, you know, if you think about it, what are they doing, right? Like you said, regenerating dopamine, energizing this or that, whatever, adding pathways. Well, what if you were a machine? You don't really like those things are no longer relevant. And it's kind of the way I thought about it was, you know, we all think of life as carbon-based life forms, but like, what if there was a sulfur-based life form or a hydrogen-based life form? The rules of physics would no longer have any bearing on them at all. Like, you know, and so that's where I kind of feel like, what do drugs look like once we've all uploaded and there's no actual human beings here, you know, like, and it's just, we're like plugged into the matrix. Right. And it seems like a weird thought, but it's like, you know, it's a weird thought, but like, I feel like we're kind of going there and like and even if we don't get there, right, we're going to get somewhere close enough where having this discussion that this shit was illegal is going to seem so nonsensical that like, you're like, why was that ever not a thing?
Well, yeah, you know, I think it goes back, and I hate to put it back, like, you know, to the 1700s, but it's almost comes to like our puritanical beginnings, right? You know, and this idea like, oh, America's this great thinking thing. No, it was ultra conservative. The first people came over here because they didn't like that the king got divorced.
Yeah.
like, fuck that. You guys aren't pious enough.
Yeah.
No, there's such a shift in everything that's happening, even just, you know, culturally and socially. And my buddy was showing me a video.
He called the Alphabet Mafia. He's trans and it's this great stand-up. But like just that from a perspective of we would have never had that conversation and everything things and polarities. And on that same point, like we're constrained huge degree by our culture. But this idea of uploading consciousness, different perspective, like spend time deep in a remote village with an indigenous tribe, or deep in the, 18,000 feet in the Himalaya with, great Tibetan Buddhists or Bhutanese practitioners, or, Bwiti and Gabon or Shipibo in Amazon. And it's like, oh, you guys have already uploaded your consciousness, and you guys are already doing interdimensional travel, and you guys are already able to connect with your ancestors and your future self. So we might get there and realize, wait, some of us have always been there.
Yeah, we've always done that. Those are crazy.
With making money and investing in portfolio companies and starting wars and, judging people who got divorced or, back to the Pilgrim. So, yeah, it's interesting.
interesting. And
Yeah, Simeon, I gotta say this before I forget. You have given the most Taoist Tai Chi answers.
Oh my God.
Where it's not one polarity, right? It's like, no, we need the science, but we need the indigenous culture that comes with it. We need both, like, and that's really where we win biggest as humans, left and right brain.
Did
right?
I tell you what Tom's PhD is in? Simeon? Can you guess?
It's not a PhD; it's a clinical doctorate.
Yeah. He's yeah. You hit a nerve with this one. He talked to you about this for a month. I love it. It's great. I love every time.
Well, I find it funny that like so many of my colleagues are starting to go like, well, we're traditional practitioners. We should be in this space.
Mm.
And it's like, you guys are late.
Yeah.
You're late. You missed it. Get the next bus.
Oh my God. Simeon, so listen, I don't want to hold you all night, but I do kind of want to get one more topic in before we get out of here.
Sure.
What is sort of your passion right now about this? I know, you've got your fun going on, but like, you kind of zero in on a lot of stuff. You have a lot of hobbies here, buddy. Like you're like what's like kind of got you lit up for the next phase of Simeon? Like what do you got?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I would say, the rabbit hole of the last year, policy, $55 billion in opioid abatement litigation blood, Oxy, which led to fentanyl, where each state has, let's just say, for simplicity, $1 billion each. And how are they going to invest that into what? And Ibogaine. As it relates to substance use disorder.
Yeah.
Ibogaine's an often forgotten compound in this conversation.
I gotta say, Hamilton's Pharmacopia's episode on that was fabulous.
Yeah, Hamilton did a great job there, and there's tip of the iceberg in what he touched, and he went really deep there, especially to fans who were like loved Pharmacopoeia, loved it. It's like, what the hell is that? I didn't even hear of it. So it's really interesting. I was first introduced to it in rather circuitous route, not I was introduced to it in high school. I moved to Ghana on my own when I was 17 in the weekend.
Whoa. We didn't get to talk about that.
I'll just upload it and you'll have to extracted and create another podcast. But that being said, there was a decision, like on the weekends when we went out, clubbing, the clubs and discos and all that. And it's like, hey, you can do this white powder that came from Nigeria and probably has adulterants, or you can chew on this bitter root bark. The root bark was an amazing stimulant, and we were able to dance till the sun came up. And after the sun came up, we were able to have fun, as teenagers might, in experimenting. So my introduction to it had nothing to, there wasn't fentanyl back then, right? Obviously there was heroin and opium. But my introduction into it was just the stimulation effect and great digestion and general health. So all these other things that isn't where it's in the limelight right now. So I've kind of been tracking it, not every day, but it's kind of always been there. And then, and this could go on for hours, the whole history. There's a few documentaries, a bunch in the works. But from what I've seen, both with the epidemic of fentanyl, which isn't getting any better, and approved therapeutics, the methadones, the Suboxones, which effectively are, you're replacing one opioid for another. And it's better because you don't die, right? But you're still kind of trapped in that opioid thing, but it's approved therapeutic. Yeah. So of course I'm going to say that's better than death, right?
Sure.
I've seen some remarkable detoxes that absolutely eliminate acute withdrawal, because it's not always just the addiction. And having spent time in clinics, dosing with addicts, having a lot of friends who've been through that, family, watching friends die and others just struggle. It's a profound plant medicine that for that particular indication is the best bet. And of course, you have a dozen companies now looking at that and creating the analog without the cathartic side effect or some of the other quote unquote side effects. So So that's like, to answer your question, it's a conflation of stuff that happened around litigation, the need right now. It's not getting better anywhere in the world, right?
Right.
And then
It's a lot of public pressure to take care of this problem.
Yeah, and medicine. So that works and will get better, and there'll be more refined protocols. So that's like, again, there's no mental indication that isn't fascinating. It's like, wow, wouldn't it be awesome to help with that? But that one specifically, where it's at in the trajectory of a year, where
for sure,
2 years ago, if you were at a conference and you mentioned it, half the people, even a psychedelic conference, we don't even know what you're talking about. It's like, oh, what do you? Well, I have a retreat and I serve, ayahuasca and mushrooms. Like, well, so what's that, Iboga? Like, what? And now people are, there's not a single clinic, and there's a few out there, in jurisdictions where it's legal, that doesn't have a year-long waiting list.
Wow.
It's just like, because there's efficacy in it, and it's still not perfect, and there's no silver bullet, and a lot of the work has to happen after, right? With integration and, potentially follow-up boosters and things like that. But to me right now, that from not just the science, but a policy to efficacy of it works today. If you follow the protocol, it'll work even better with other things based on it in the future is kind of what's really, keeping me going. Everything keeps me going, but it's so beyond just great. We'll make a lot of money,
Sure. No. And to the policy part, like when you're talking to congressmen, senators, governors, whoever, like, is that conversation's got to be softening now, right? Like those guys got to be like sort of, a lot more receptive to this.
No. And in fact, one of the first senators allocated the first money to ibogaine research from his opioid abatement litigation. And I'm talking other governors, attorney generals, spending time, all up and down the Congo Basin, which I'll be back in, Ghana, Togo, Ivory Coast. There's a new country potentially starting in Nigeria, would be the 55th country in Nigeria. A lot of this plant medicine grows there. And then most recently spending a good amount of time in Gabon, which is kind of known for wheat.
Known for the ibogaine,
There's no better time to find opportunity than post a coup d'etat. So, was there a month after meeting with the new prime minister, minister of health, minister of social affairs, startups, NGOs, people coming there to experience the medicine in an indigenous sense. And there's nobody there in that government or even neighboring governments from Guinea-Bissau to Cameroon to Democratic Republic of Congo that aren't aware they have a valuable potential export and needs to be protected and could be.
So they're keeping the shady people at bay during this little transition period, I assume.
As much as possible.
Sure.
I mean,
no, it's not going to be a perfect system, but they're aware of it about the point. Now even you see like Kenya and Tanzania have been years paying ex-poachers to basically protect the animals now instead of kill them, and they're paying them a livable wage to do it. Right. So but they only did that because they realized, hey man, if all the elephants die, then no one comes here and spends any money because that's what they're fucking coming here for. So we will protect the elephants, not because we give a shit about elephants, but because we give a shit about tourism.
Because you're paying us.
And to that earlier point, like, hey, if this could be a benefit and you're not stripping away that profit, but converting it into, instead of killing the animals, you're protecting them and still thriving and still exporting and still having a higher GDP or whatever that metric is. So that's happening. And you're going to see a nice not conflation, but closer ties. The night before I left Gabon on my way to Togo, a couple months ago, it was the second day of the new United States ambassador. So she had a little mixer at the embassy, and her previous gig was humanitarian relief for all of Africa. So just in that conversation, like, what should I be doing? And as again, she's an ambassador, so her gig is to find relations with the U.S. ambassador, with the U.S. and what's the foreign direct investment and job development and exchange and all that. And of course, plant medicine wasn't the number one because Gabon has a lot of oil and gas, but ironically,
it's on the list.
Yeah, it's definitely on the list. Yeah.
How have we not invaded?
Yeah, well, so that was gonna be like the last, like
Mr. Colonial. We did, but it was a while ago, right?
no, but like I'd hate to ask the hyper colonial question here, the 21st century, like, you know, machine gun colonists, but
They need freedom.
why, yeah, why, well, even if we didn't invade them, like, let's just say we just said, you know what, that's a lot of effort. Why are we not like taking spores, seeds, plant samples, whatever, and just doing it here in a hydroponics lab and cut out the middleman?
Because it's hard to do at the same cost. I mean, I've lived internationally and spent time in other countries where it was just like, man, we could do this all in, you know, Maryland, right? But it's a lot cheaper to do it all there, put it on a ship.
That's crazy. Is it really?
You know, it really is. But,
wow.
You know, if I showed you some of, and everybody knows this, like, I mean, here we are, colonialists, in one of the wealthiest companies with all of the support, right? But this is not the rest of the world. So if you could do something in the US hydroponically, with great efficiency, and you could do it elsewhere, just putting seeds in the ground with not the same efficiency, but you have 1,000 laborers that you're paying a 1% of what it would cost to invest in the hydro. That's where it's at right now.
I see what you're saying. So crawl, walk, run. You know. Yeah. Because eventually, if that thing turns into the $1 billion industry that I'm pretty sure it will become, there'll be plenty of money to build hydroponic farms to grow that shit.
Oh no, and there absolutely will. And there's some cool research projects. I mean, even in the last week, so much cool research has come out, and even meta research on the research. Whenever I hear a word in any discussion, I go like, okay, stuff's going on. If someone's doing the this of the this, right?
Yeah, of course.
But right now, that from just if we're talking about hydro and farms, like that industry. By the time I finish this sentence, that entire industry of Iboga and Ibogaine annually, by the time I finish this sentence, is annually less than the time I finish this sentence MDMA sales or mushroom sales. So it's still really small from where it's at, but one or two regulatory shifts, movements, opioid abatement, and all this stuff does become this huge juggernaut. The plant is still important. We can't make this without the plant, like so many drugs.
And I think that the technology here, what's interesting about where we're at from a compounding standpoint is now when we understand the chemical structures of these things and we understand, you know, we have a cross comparative study. Like we know like, okay, compounds that look like this, do this. And we have a real keen understanding of these things. I think that like, you know, in a way we might be almost past like illegal drugs because like the compounds will be so hyper boutique.
The legislation won't keep up with it.
There'll be no way of making, by the time they know it's illegal, there'll be something else. Right. And then, you know, I just don't see that being like possible to keep up with. And I don't know that there's any motivation at a certain point either.
Yeah, there isn't. I mean, there is the Analog Act. And the other thing that triggers it, like, I mean, fentanyl is a great example of keeping up, but even you know, we look at fentanyl a lot, right? And it moves so fast. So like, you know, the fentanyl from a year ago is very different than the fentanyl today, and it's going to be very different than the fentanyl even a year from now. So it might have a new name, and will that not even be on the schedule list? But I mean, right now there's a big petition that the DA wants to schedule these 5 effectively research drugs. Because it's an analog enough, but there's tens of thousands. So I agree with you 100% that it's going to be hard to keep up with. But somehow, you know, the powers that be and the systems we've created. I mean, again, I go back to that cannabis thing. Like the states are saying, wait a minute. And yet it's still federally illegal. Like what? And
I think I'm hoping that we're getting to the end of that too. All that is basically presidents not wanting to ruffle feathers.
I mean, didn't Biden say he was going to decriminalize it?
You know, no one's actually said it. That's the problem, right? Nobody ever comes out and says
I'm mishearing all the promises.
No, they allude to it. They, you know.
It's really not that bad.
They get close to saying it, but they don't really. I mean, I think it's a stupidity of our nation for sure, but it's so quintessentially human, right? Like we're like, all right, well, there's like 1% really annoying loud people that are going to bitch to high heaven if we actually come out and officially endorse this, but like everyone else is either dead silent about it or agrees with it, and like, but we're still not going to do anything about it and cause trillions of dollars worth of damage between unrecognized revenue and fucking punitive damages and all kinds of shit in the middle. It's like fucking stupid, you know. And Simeon, I mean, I share your enthusiasm, but I feel about like I think I have my knowledge lies on the cannabis side of this over the psychedelic side. So when it comes to that side of this equation, I'm like, but this is bad. And you start going back to like, okay, let me tell you why this was illegal in the first place, which also makes no fucking sense, you know? Like, you know, like, so
it's totally true. And, you know, I should draw the distinction that, you know, the way it's going right now, and if, you know, go cut to 4+ years ago when we were even setting up the initial banking, I had, you know, some PTSD is an exaggeration, but PTSD from, you know, cannabis stuff in the past, you know, where I sold my dispensary in 2012, right? And so I had a dispensary in 2007 in California, and everything we wrote was, we didn't like mention psychedelics. It was just biotech. Like there was no mention in the legal stuff and how
you couldn't
bank accounts, because in the past there were issues with banking, right? And for the most part, you know, the states are a little different, but the majority of the psychedelics industry is moving towards, you know, this approved, heavily medicalized, FDA approved, which is why there's been more progress in the last week in psychedelics, or I should say last 2 weeks, with breakthrough designation for a psilocybin derivative, Cybin, and then, you know, a non-therapeutic, effectively a microdose, if you will, of LSD. But that the FDA approved these as breakthrough designations after MDMA got breakthrough designations.
Just because of the analog thing, or because like they just attach
no,
them?
because there's data, and
there's
it's
data.
like
Okay.
time is needed, and it's not going to be, or at least the narrative right now, it's like you won't be able to walk into, well, like here in New York, there's 1,800 illegal bodegas that you can walk into and get weed. It's going to be more medicalized, right? Or at least that's the narrative, and that's where you see, you know, Johnson & Johnson buying, you know, Spravato, a ketamine, right? And others, the biotech, the pharma looking at this space, which will protect their pipelines, which will continue to, you know, share, administer pharmaceuticals and the system we have with insurance and profitability and all that. So although we're talking about it, you know, whether it's Wall Street Deadhead or Psychonaut, Biohack Geeks, the actual movement and why it's moving so much faster than cannabis is because it's really being touted, if you will, positioned as a pharmaceutical, as a medicine, as a non-rec play, which is why you have all these provisions.
It feels safer. Yeah. They're putting a nice little safety net under it. But I will tell you though, you know, we always laughed about cannabis being a gateway drug. I do think that I agree that cannabis is a gateway drug, but for a completely different reason. I think that like people who, let's say, didn't ever smoke weed, never experienced the level of relaxation or mind cessation or like brain, you know, crazy thought cessation, like you do when you get really, really high, right?
Yeah.
And once you get to that spot, there's a lot of other new possibilities that hit your radar that just weren't there before. And one of them is for some people is psychedelics. It was for me, and everybody else who took that same path. I don't know that I ever would have even like been able to go from my pre-cannabis space head jumping into like, you know, daily microdosing. You know, like that doesn't feel like a jump I would have been able to really get to, you know, and so I really do think that from a legal perspective, it almost feels like the same thing, right? Like, okay, so we had to go
it is
from
the gateway drug.
Yeah, it's the gateway drug.
Yeah.
It's the gateway legality as well, because we had to go through cannabis to even have space held for psychedelics, because we didn't have a vocabulary to define what that could or couldn't be. So it would be sort of impossible to have that conversation. Does that make sense? It
makes total sense. Yeah, I know we were like saying, "Hey, we're wrapping up," and I'm looking at the time. I can't.
I know. I don't,
oh man, we're going to be on here for 5 hours if we don't wrap it up soon.
Simeon's like, I got shit to do, man. I gotta go. Like, yeah.
I told these assholes an hour.
Yeah.
No. It's the other way around. But there's so many other topics. I mean, we don't have time to get into all the peptide stuff, but
dude, yeah. So Tom went through a whole peptide phase.
That's sexy to me, like man. I've ordered not for human consumption. Here's the lab testing.
Yeah.
Offline, we should compare stats.
Yeah.
Some
right.
of the peptides what did I try the other day that blew me away? PT-141. Tried.
Okay, see, I haven't done that one yet. I did the PP.
Tom's like, hold on, can you spell it? Hold on, let me get the transcript.
Hang on, let me pull up peptides, prestige peptides or something.
Yeah. Oh man.
But like, look, man, I'm running out of syringes. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a whole case, so I'll.
Well, Simeon, you know what, man? Listen, let's. It was awesome for you to take time, man. I honestly
oh my God,
could
this
take
was
for
so
you
much
for
fun, man.
I feel bad I can't take you, Tom, because Deb's really, really, really particular about who she lets in the room, and she will straight 1980s.
I'm weird.
WWF.
I'm socially awkward.
Yeah, no. She will WWF your ass out herself if I tried to bring in. So I can't do that. But I will say hi to Simeon on your behalf when I see him. But
thank you. I already LinkedIn requested him, which is like the complete opposite of everything we've been talking about.
It's funny.
It's like the most corporate thing I could do.
Talking about colonization, can you accept my LinkedIn request, please?
Please allow me into your network.
Oh man, hey brother, I really appreciate it. Simeon, where can people find you? Let's tell them what you're up to. Where would we drive to JLS?
Yeah,
Fund's
JLS
website.
Fund is the website, and my email is Simeon, SIMEON @JLS.fund.
Awesome, man.
Or if you want to play Colonial, just send me a LinkedIn request like Tom.
That's funny. Yeah, that is funny. I love it, man. And you know what? It's like people who are in this space, like it's like the one industry I could think of that are like, yeah, fucking I'll LinkedIn everybody. Because if you're LinkedIn and me, we probably should have a conversation about something.
Well, he's already when I pulled him up, I'm like, oh, he knows Brian. Of course he knows Brian.
Brian. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, Brian is one of our friends that we talked about earlier on with some successful health stuff.
I have a prototype of his sitting in my office.
Okay. How well do you know Brian? Do you know what he does?
I might be linked to 1,000 Bryans. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Brian Leggett specifically.
From a company called Amortal.
Oh yeah. What a douche. No, I don't really.
That's fucking awesome. I can't wait to tell Brian about it. Yeah. No, we'll tell you about it offline or some other time, but he's got some cool science fiction looking shit that was
crazy stuff.
So next level sci-fi that he decked out a custom Airstream just to drive it around the country on demo. It's fucking badass. It's like, it's like next level crazy. It's awesome.
He might be IPOing if you want to get
Yeah. Right. He's like some seriously crazy shit.
Connected to on LinkedIn.
No, you're connected to him already. So, go there. All right, Simeon, man, have a great night, brother. Be well.
Oh my God, this was so much fun. Thank you so much, man.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.